Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Eva. It's my pleasure today to present Trauma 101, a case-based trauma conference as an adjunct to medical education. So in terms of background for our study, the COVID-19 pandemic has significantly impacted the medical school curriculum, limiting access to simulation-based trauma education and core surgical clerkship rotations. Virtual learning has been integrated into medical education as an alternative to live synchronous sessions. However, its effectiveness for teaching critical concepts in trauma resuscitation has not been validated. And not much is known about how it translates to online learning in clerkship. So for our study, medical students were invited to attend a 2-day virtual trauma conference organized by the student interest groups at McMaster University and promoted on social media. It occurred in a synchronous format over a weekend in October 2020. Recruitment was directed towards Canadian undergraduate medical students in any year of study, though postgraduate and international medical learners were also welcome to participate. So as mentioned before, this was a 2-day conference. The first day included 9 interactive lectures by physicians and residents in 5 different specialties, including general surgery, orthopedics, OBGYN, anesthesiology, and pediatrics. The learning centered around case-based discussions about the basics of trauma resuscitation, with skills taught through a combination of discussion, images, and videos. Presentation slides were shared through screen sharing by the speaker or the organizers. The schedule was distributed beforehand to participants, enabling them to participate in any session as they please. The second day of the conference consisted of a virtual small group case discussions. We recruited approximately 20 residents in general surgery, orthopedics, OBGYN, pediatrics, plastic surgery, ENT, and internal medicine to lead sessions in 8 topics. They were also in trauma resuscitation. The residents presented slides describing trauma cases and asked the participants to consider the ABCDEs of trauma sequentially and making clinical decisions at every step. Each group consisted of 1 rotating resident and 4 to 7 learners. Each participant took part in 4 different cases throughout the day, and groups of participants were assigned beforehand, with residents rotating through the groups. In terms of how we host this conference was hosted on Zoom. 1 team member was designated as the event host. We created the event on their Zoom account, and they were responsible for assigning participants to breakout rooms for the second day, muting participants and removing any should it become necessary. To protect against cybersecurity problems, we prepared a backup Zoom link, which was not shared publicly, and participants were required to use their full name on their Zoom profiles. All team members, we also admitted the participants into a waiting room, and all team members were designated as co-hosts and able to admit participants into the waiting room. We ran a trial session beforehand to ensure that the team member hosting the event had reliable internet connection and could perform the task as described above. Student engagement was a key component to the conference. Although attendees were muted on the first day, interaction through the didactic lectures were achieved through integration of Zoom polling questions, maybe approximately 4 to 5 each. And participants were encouraged to turn on their cameras. And the chat was, and they could also enter questions into the chat box. The chat was moderated by a general surgery fellow, and during the small group sessions, the participants were not muted. They were encouraged to turn on their cameras and use their microphones to discuss the case with their group. So in terms of the organizing team, we had 5 medical students on the team in the surgery and orthopedic surgery interest group at McMaster University, and a general surgery fellow who supported us with the event planning process. We have a figure of how the participants were assigned to breakout rooms, and logistical roles included curriculum development, Zoom platform management, participant recruitment and communication, and speaker recruitment and communication. The study was waived for ethical review. And in terms of our results, a total of 360 medical students from all over Canada registered for the conference. This included 122 students in their first year, 116 students in their second year, 86 students in their third year, and 24 students in their fourth year, 5 MD PhD students, and 7 participants in other stages of training, such as residency. And I would say the majority of the students were from Canada, though in total, there were some international medical students from 4 other countries as well. Although there were 360 total participant registrations, there was significant attrition between conference registration and attendance. And we had 167 peak simultaneous connections on our first day and 68 participants on the second day. So we wanted to test whether this was an effective method of teaching trauma resuscitation. So in order to confirm that this was a good teaching method, we administered pre and post tests at a difficulty level that was appropriate to the participants. And we asked the participants to fill them out before and after the conference. And we were able to perform a paired t-test analysis of the pre and post test on all participants who completed both questionnaires, which is a total of 73 participants. And this demonstrated a statistically significant mean improvement of approximately 2.7 points out of 10. A one-way ANOVA analysis demonstrated no significant difference between the pre-test performances of participants based on medical school. No difference in amount of improvement was seen from different schools, and there was a significant difference in pre-test scores of participants at different stages of training. So for example, second-year medical students would do better than the first-year medical students. However, there was no significant difference in the amount of improvement they were able to achieve through this conference. Further analysis demonstrated, as mentioned, a correlation between year of study and pre-test results, which is to be expected given the increased level of training. Participants were also asked to subjectively rate the effectiveness of each large and small group session, as well as the effectiveness of their instructors on a 7-point Likert scale. They were asked to rate their agreement to a series of statements about the day, such as whether it was an effective conference, if it was good preparation for clerkship, and would they attend it again. In total, 87.5% to 99% of participants rated each large group session as effective, and 95% of participants rated the small group sessions as effective. Overall, the feedback for the conference was extremely positive, with 95% of participants agreeing that the online platform was effective, 86% agreeing that the content was appropriate to their level, and 93% agreeing that the large group sessions were interactive, and 97% agreeing that the conference was helpful preparation for clerkship. And 99% agreed that they recommend this conference to a friend or attend a similar conference in the future. The feedback for the second day was equally positive. 95% agreed that the small group case-based learning sessions were effective. 88% agreed that the content was appropriate to their level. 98% agreed that the online platform was effective, and 98% agreed that they would attend a similar small group session in the future. So in summary, there was a high participant satisfaction and significantly improved post-test results, which support the virtual model of teaching trauma education at the medical student level as an effective adjunct to clerkship curriculum. Virtual small group-based sessions and social media were beneficial in enhancing participant engagement, and we believe that this study has important implications for future design and implementation of virtual conferences and medical education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eva. All right, so we're at time. So if there is like a burning question, you can put it in the chat and we can squeeze it in. Anyone has any questions? All right, so I don't see any questions in the chat. So thank you, Eva, so much for your presentation. Our next presenter is Grace. Hi, Grace.
Hi.
How are you? Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Awesome.
All right, so I'll just give you a 1 minute warning either in the chat or I'll turn my video on. Can you see me? Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thanks so much. So just imagine, it's your first day on your anesthesia clerkship. You walk into the OR, you see the blue, you see the stainless steel, you're not supposed to touch that. That's okay. But, you're trying to think back last night where you did the modules you were supposed to do very dutifully, you took your notes, and now you're actually in the clinical setting, but you have nothing to rely on. You're kind of frozen. You start digging through the anesthesia chart, the anesthesia cart. You see some vials of a lot of different medications that you have totally forgotten the names of. You've totally forgotten, okay, I see propofol. I kind of remember what that is. Stands out because it's a white liquid and all the other ones are clear. And now, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do. You keep digging, you see a lot of tubing, you see some IV stuff. You look to the side, you see this big anesthetic machine and you have no idea what it does or how it functions. And now you're starting to wonder, shoot, like, what am I supposed to know? What am I supposed to learn? And how am I ever going to get through all of this knowledge in order to be able to come back every day into the OR and feel like I actually have the access to the material that I need to in order to better supplement, this day-to-day in the OR with the stuff I'm trying to learn every night when I go home. So that kind of overwhelming feeling is exactly why we decided to create the Anesthesia Clerkship Pocket Guide, which is a quick reference guide intended for clerks to use on their core rotations, that they're able to easily bring in, it fits in your scrub pocket, but even better, it's on your phone and it's written in a way that is easily accessible. It's something that, oh shoot, like I need to search up this drug. And so you have a chart that lets you, go through the mechanism of action, the main contraindications, etc. And then you can tuck it away and just forget about it until the next time you need that quick refresher of knowledge. So we know that anesthesia is a mandatory 2-week rotation in most Canadian medical schools, but there isn't really a resource like this. There is some free online resources. Most of them are written in a textbook manner that's not very easy to bring with you. It's more something that you would, again, use the night before when you're trying to study or read up on your cases, but nothing really accessible. And so that's what we created. And we based it off of the McMaster Clerkship learning objectives because we felt like that was the most kind of condensed kind of knowledge source that a clerk would need to know to pass their rotation and ultimately be able to take that information and integrate it into whatever career, whatever specialty in medicine they choose to pursue. And so we took those objectives, we summarized them into different sections, and the author ultimately wrote the sections, and then it went through an iterative review process using 3 different layers, including clinical clerks, residents, anesthesia residents, as well as anesthesiologists who are working all in the McMaster medical education system. And each of them has slightly varying objectives as reviewers, and you can feel free to ask me about that if you'd like me to expand. Then as we disseminated this, we not only did it through obviously McMaster because this is where the resource was created, but we also disseminated it on social media as well as through an email to the undergraduate medical education clerkship directors across Canada. And if you're interested in seeing the resource yourself, please feel free to use the QR code at the bottom corner of this poster or go to mcmasteracp.ca. So talking about the results of who's actually using this, it was published online in April of 2020, and the results you see are from April to February 2021. Obviously, it's June now, so our results haven't been updated, but I can give you a rundown. So in the time period that's captured on this poster, there are 731 respondents. We are fairly satisfied with the number of respondents actually capturing who was using it, because in order to access the resource, you actually do have to complete the survey. Of the different medical schools, the three most popular schools are McMaster University, the University of Ottawa, and the University of British Columbia. And most recently, in the most recent update, there have been around over 1,000 downloads now. And actually, McGill has started to kind of come up because one of the preceptors has started recently to recommend this resource. But the reason that McMaster, Ottawa, and UBC are the top three are because these schools are actually recommending this resource regularly to their students, either through MedPortal, which McMaster uses, being a prerequisite reading for actually being used on their clerkship curriculum, like at U Ottawa, or being recommended by course coordinators and preceptors at UBC. The type of student who uses this book is most likely a clerk, so second or third year medical students in 3-year schools, or third or fourth year in 4-year schools. And again, most of these respondents heard of this resource from a preceptor or a staff who is recommending this, and that makes us really excited to see that staff and people who are actually teaching medical students find value in this and think that our students could use a resource like this. So of the two qualitative results I want to highlight are, first, the number of students who feel unprepared to enter their anesthesia clerkship. So 52% of students who responded felt unprepared or very unprepared. So that corresponds to the red and the orange on the pie chart to enter their core rotation. And that's not surprising. It does correspond with previous literature in anesthesia and medical education in general, that a lot of clerks don't have exposure to anesthesia, especially in the pre-clerkship curriculum, in the same way that topics in family medicine, internal medicine, general surgery, psychiatry, etc., are very much tied directly into the tutorial sessions, the clinical skills. So that's not surprising, but it does mean that there's progress that we can make in that area. In contrast, you can see the very small sliver of green and light green, which were students that said they were prepared or very prepared to enter their clerkship, their anesthesia clerkship. The second qualitative result from this survey was that 51% of students were not interested in pursuing anesthesiology as a career at the point of the survey. And again, that is not unsurprising. It does correspond with previous literature in this topic. And again, it's something we wonder about, is it more that they've actually explored it and have ruled it out? Or is it just because the exposure to anesthesia in pre-clerkship is so small, and that this 2-week window in the clerkship portion can come at any time? And with that overwhelming feeling, it can be hard to really learn and kind of get into what type of medicine and what type of specialty this is in comparison to, for say, a 6 or 8 week rotation in internal medicine or general surgery. So those are the two results we thought were most interesting, and again, correlated well with previous literature. And just as a side note, on the side, you can see some excerpts from the resource itself. So one document in kind of a orientation to the OR, and then on the other side is a quick drug reference chart that is color-coded as well to the typical labels found on the chart. Just trying to reinforce that learning with the clinical setting and with something that you can refer back to. So ultimately, what do we think we can do going forward? Well, we hope that this resource is continuing to be used. It is free. We're trying to lower barriers in our education, especially for clerks, where even 30, 40 bucks for a textbook can be a barrier. And then we think that going forwards, we'd like to put out a survey and go to those 52% of students and say, what was it about that entering this anesthesia rotation that made you feel apprehensive? Was it the knowledge? Was it procedural things? Was it just not understanding the specialty? And ultimately be able to use those guide points and continue to make steps forward in not only just anesthesia education, but generally medical education as a whole. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Grace. What a wonderful project. Does anyone have any questions for Grace? I have a quick question, actually, Grace. Oh, yeah. Actually, we have one in the chat here. Do faculty use this to teach?
I guess it varies by faculty. I have had a preceptor mention that he's pulled it out and kind of made quick quizzes for like my friends and colleagues who have gone through the rotation just as teaching points, because what we cover is in the clerkship objectives and ultimately should be known for clerks graduating, I guess, or moving through this clerkship. So I guess it does vary.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Grace. Thanks. So our next presenter is it Zara or Zara? Did I pronounce that right?
Zara, that's perfect.
Zara, awesome. Okay, I'll give you a 1-minute warning. And the floor is yours.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Zara Morali. I'm an internal medicine fellow at Western University. And I'd like to present my poster presentation, Why Do Residents Create? Using a podcast to explore the resident experience during creation of teaching presentations. Thank you very much to my co-authors for their assistance with this project. So when you think of a typical teaching presentation in residency, you may picture an internal medicine resident standing in front of an audience in person or over Zoom, going through a typical PowerPoint presentation that they have prepared. Feedback is given after the presentation usually, and there may be some element of presenter anxiety. Peer-assisted learning is an established teaching method well described in the literature, which is a method of residents teaching colleagues or medical students. The Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons states that the ability for residents to teach student learners is actually a core competency, and thus most internal medicine programs mandate teaching presentations throughout training. These presentations usually occur on service-heavy rotations, and while having the role of a teacher, residents also balance their role as patient care providers and learners. So given the considerable time that residents spend on their teaching presentations, we wanted to explore their experience in creation and in doing this further. To do this, we used a voluntary teaching activity as a comparator. The Internet Work is a resident-generated podcast series created by one of my co-authors and co-developed by myself that offers a script writing experience to residents. We sought to understand learner motivation and engagement during the creation of a podcast for the Internet Work, in contrast to the creation of mandated teaching presentations. So in terms of our method, we used purposive sampling to recruit residents from McMaster University in 2020 to 2021, who wrote a podcast for the Internet Work. Focus groups were completed using semi-structured interviews, and after we reached thematic saturation, we had 3 focus groups in total, with 12 participants in total. In terms of our results, all residents stated that they would create a podcast script again, but only one stated that they would create a mandated teaching activity again. And so let's dissect this a bit further. If you look to the right, you see table 1. This goes through 3 key factors that increased learner motivation and engagement in the creation of a podcast for the Internet Work. These 3 key factors were: 1, residents were drawn to the project with an intrinsic motivator. 2, they enjoyed the self-directed process of the project itself. And 3, they appreciated several tangible benefits or gains after the completion of the project. So first, in terms of an intrinsic motivator, we were able to dissect that out into 2 themes. Number 1 was curiosity. Residents were curious enough to want to engage in this innovative, different project, or perhaps they had listened to medical podcasts before and wanted to become involved with this. Secondly, we found that residents had an enthusiasm to teach with a pragmatic approach, and this is well supported in the literature, that residents really enjoy teaching something that is directly applicable to their daily practice. And so they prefer to teach others about if it was congestive heart failure, how to directly treat your patient with heart failure that day. And that would be something that their learners could actually use later on the wards. And this was in contrast to most of the mandated teaching presentations at McMaster at that time were more evidence-based, such as journal clubs. Secondly, they enjoyed a self-directed process during the creation of the podcast. This involved autonomy and authority that they had while creating the podcast itself. For example, they could choose to create the podcast on a rotation that was less service heavy, where they had less call requirements. So they had more time and space to actually dedicate to that project itself. And secondly, they enjoyed collaboration with subspecialty staff during the creation of the podcast and before dissemination of the final product. That's again in contrast to mandated teaching presentations, where often a resident creates a project or a presentation alone and then presents it in front of an audience, and the attending may be part of the audience and gives them feedback in front of a crowd. And finally, they were able to gain several tangible benefits. The first theme from that is that they had something to add to their academic portfolio, whether it was something physical, like adding something to their CV, or something even more meaningful, like starting a new relationship with a faculty member in their subspecialty of interest before they applied to CARMS. And perhaps what we found most interesting was that residents could describe that they actually used the podcast to create a teaching script. And so if they did a podcast on community-acquired pneumonia, they were able to sort of, when they wrote the podcast, they were able to put down a layout of how they approached that topic in teaching. And then many residents said that later on in their residency, they were actually able to very quickly draw up that mental layout and teach that topic to residents that they were training. PGY2s who are in their new role of a teacher may not have had the foresight to create teaching scripts before, and so this offered a very valuable opportunity. I'd like to just highlight this quote here. The way the podcast was organized mentally for me, I think I used that same approach to do the teaching using a Blackboard. So that allowed me to create, to make comparisons to myself about how I go about teaching things as well. So this project examines 3 motivational factors that increased engagement with a voluntary scholarly project that can inform development of future mandatory residency activities. And perhaps in the future, when you picture a typical residency teaching presentation, it will no longer be a resident standing in front of an audience with a slideshow, but may involve digital education or something like a podcast instead. The Intern at Work is an example of asynchronous peer-assisted learning that has similar benefits to direct peer-assisted learning from a resident teacher perspective. So in summary, an intrinsic motivator, self-directed process, and tangible benefit fostered resident engagement and intent to create podcasts. Future research should be directed to see whether this framework applies to existing or new teaching presentations. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful project. All right, does anyone have any questions? I'm curious to know what I might have missed it in the beginning, but what sort of inspired this project, because it's a very creative project. Would you care to comment?
It's a great question. When the three of my co-authors, when we created this podcast series, we were unsure how many volunteers we would actually get to write podcast scripts, because internal medicine residency is so busy and we have all these competing things going on, especially in PGY 1, 2, and even 3 now with the Royal College. And we weren't sure if we would get any uptake in it, but we actually had a surprising and overwhelming almost amount of uptake. And so really we were trying to see what was it about the project that, despite everything else that residents had going on and all their other mandated teaching presentations, why were they also interested in writing a podcast, and what was it about that creation process that they were really enjoying?
Very interesting. Well, thank you. All right, so I think we have our last presentation next, Youssef. All right, Youssef, I'll give you a 1-minute warning, but the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emily. So today I'm going to present our library project that we developed at MERIT. And so it is called hbeworld.com. So you can visit this website either typing this URL, or you can also scan this QR code on the right top side. So initially this project began with the curiosity of the how we can create a evergreen link for the resources for the HBE literature. So our assistant dean, Dr. Jonathan Sherbino, was looking for the ways, and then we teamed up about this idea and then how we can process this idea and then take it further with the steps. So we came up this idea creating an online crowdsourced project so that anybody in this our field can contribute this kind of library project, and it will be evolving through the contribution to our scholars and researchers within this field. So initially we developed a list of resources. These are including all the articles, books, book chapters, podcasts, blog posts, infographics, different types of resources for HB literature. And this initial created list came in from the clinician educator diploma, and then our team created this list and then marked them as a must read or should read, and then we categorize them within the different education categories so that we can provide more contextualized library for our readers. So that's because we developed a database for initial almost 400 resources. And then we created this HB World project with our team, and we created a web application. So it is public and it's open to everyone to as hbworld.com. And then during this time, since the launch of this website, which is February 18, we collected some data behind the scenes using Google Analytics. So I'm going to present this data and then how it's going to be look like when we use it more within our field. So when we look at the data, since the release of this website to our community, we saw 923 people visited our website and 180 people returned the website to browse more and more. And these website visits received 2.9K views, page views across the website. These are including all the resources, all the pages and landing pages, different categories within the library. And these users came from United States as a first place, and then Canada, Mexico, Portuguese, and Australia followed. And we are seeing this world heat map, how these people are visiting our website. So when you look at the middle downside, you can see the architecture of a resource. So these resources are categorized with the must or should read. So you can see this eye icon. So these are the representing the should read, and then we have also must read, which is represented as a flyer, and then so that you can understand these resources are really highly recommended by our editors and our team. And also we are looking for the other suggestions through this website so that you can suggest your must reads or should read for the HB literature. So once any resources are within our database and published, so we will be able to rate it with out of 5 stars. So this is the Yelp features are coming out, and we can also put some comments about the articles. So this is kind of your key highlights about the articles, your reaction to the article or the resources, and you can comment on anything about these resources. You could do this anonymously, or either you could put your Twitter handle, your email, your name, but anonymous is another option. So we are presenting this number of ratings, number of comments, and then number of reads, how many times the people are clicking these resources and then reading these resources through our website. So these resources are categorized under 11 main category. And also we have 61 subcategories. And currently we have 417 resources published on the website. And we are receiving some suggestion, like 20 new suggestion to be reviewed and then published on the website in the following days and months. So we will be able to expand this database with the crowdsourced contribution coming from our community. So we are looking for inputs, and we are looking your reviews and comments about these resources, so that we will be able to provide more community-driven resources to the visitors, so that it will be helpful to our early career educators, early career researchers within the HPE, and then we will be able to provide them more and more community, well-respected, well-received resources. It will be really easy to access, because the website, if you are visiting right now, so you will be able to see some filter options. So you could filter by the category, you could filter the using the must or read, or you could also filter like 5-star reviews or 4-star reviews, so that it will be giving you the most recommended papers coming from the live data from our community. So these are the overall idea from the project, and we are looking forward to expand this library with the contribution from our field. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yusuf. Does anyone have any questions at all? Well, I'll see if I'll give a little bit more time for the chat there for any questions, but I'm curious to know, Yusuf, what do you think are sort of the byproducts of the culture around using this type of tool? Like, how do you think it's going to change how we do this type of work?
So when we look at the literature and you want to read a paper about a topic, like let's say online learning, which paper you are going to start as an early career educator or early career researcher? You could also look at some altmetric score of the papers or citations that you are seeing. And this is a good way to assess a paper. But how about blog posts? How about like which podcast you are going to listen from Keyline, like about this? So we are amalgamating all these resources into one place, and then we are rating these all resources into single place, and then it will be more apparent to everyone who is going to read this online learning. Okay, here's the must read paper you are going to start with, and here's the should read paper you are going to go next with. So, and then you will be able to see the comments of the readers, and then you will be able to direct access these resources from our website. So this is a cool way to like engaging with our community. So I think it makes sense. Like for me, I'm doing this like whenever I want to explore a topic, I first go this HPE library and then see what the must read papers on this topic.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Yusuf, and everyone for attending the session. I'd just like to encourage you to move over to the main room for the closing remarks and award announcements. All right. Well, thank you and take care.